I want to thank everybody for their constructive and encouraging comments on the video I just recently did comparing the tropical and sidereal approach to interpreting charts using Donald Trump as an example. If you don't know the video I'm talking about, look in the description text. I'll give a link to it. What I'm going to do now in this video is reply to some of the more noteworthy doubts raised in those comments. First thing I want to say is, wow, this is really a lesson in subjectivity. One person in the comments was actually noted that and thought maybe this proves that astrology is useless. But that's not the case. Actually, reality is extremely subjective. And astrology, being very subjective, accurately reflects reality, which itself is very subjective. Now let's get on to some of the specific doubts raised. The first thing is, as I mentioned, if you use a tropical system, then Trump's Sankhya Yoga, which is a really important basic yoga to take into account, will be, in tropical, it will be harsha, which means a person who enjoys life. Having fun is their basic motive. But if you do it in sidereal, then his Sankhya Yoga is Dharma, which means this is a person whose basic motive is to benefit others, do good for others, and carry out their responsibilities, etc. So a couple of people in the comments were like, man, Trump is so dharmic, you just don't know it because you're influenced by fake news, etc., etc. You got to, if you take away one thing from my video, the video that we're talking about, it's not even about whether it's tropical or sidereal. The real important thing is how you have to interpret a birth chart, not by taking something out of context. You can't base your interpretation of a person on one factor, no matter what that one factor is. Look at the context, please. In both systems, whether it's sidereal or tropical, Donald Trump has got the ninth lord. Ninth house is the house of morals, Dharma. He's got the ninth lord 3 degrees away from the ascendant. And in both systems, sidereal or tropical, he's got the first lord, which is the sun, which is also a dharmic planet. He's got the first lord getting a big aspect from Jupiter, a dharmic planet. So, of course, Donald Trump is going to be a person with a lot of moralism, morals, moralistic kind of person. And either system. You don't need to have a Dharma Yoga to explain that this person has morals or is moralistic or is religious in some way, right? Well, what you need to do is take everything together. If you take a Dharma Yoga with the ninth lord on the ascendant and Jupiter aspecting the sun, who's the first lord, you get a person with all those 3 things multiplying each other. It depicts a person who sacrifices everything for the benefit of society and family and all those things. They sacrifice their personal desire. Their personal interest comes second. That's what Dharma means. And that's what the sidereal is describing Donald Trump as. The tropical chart, if you take the harsha yoga and multiply that with the ninth lord on the ascendant at 3 degrees separation, and if you take Jupiter aspecting the sun, the first lord, but with a harsha yoga, then you get a picture of a person who does serve society, who does have morals, but not at the expense of their personal pleasures. Their personal pleasures come first, and number 2 thing they want to do is be good for society. So that is definitely, I don't care what fake news you're listening to, that is definitely and obviously, objectively, a more accurate description of who Trump is. It's based on the fact that he's a billionaire. You don't get to be a billionaire when you don't put your own interests first. Now, here's another topic. Another topic brought up was whether Jupiter should really be in the 2nd house, not the 3rd. Because in sidereal, in his main chart, Jupiter's in the 2nd house. And in tropical, Jupiter's in the 3rd house. So here's a quote from one of the comments. In sidereal, he also has stationary Jupiter. Stationary will be whether it's sidereal or tropical, right? The planet doesn't change its speed depending on the zodiac used. So in sidereal or tropical, Jupiter is stationary. But this person's making the point that in sidereal, that Jupiter is in the 2nd house of finances and administration and imagination. I don't know where you get the idea that the 2nd house is the house of administration and imagination. So this really fits a billionaire to have Jupiter in the 2nd house. But like I say, sure, that's one way that you can indicate wealth. But there are many other ways to indicate wealth. In the tropical chart, Jupiter's in the 3rd house. What's the third house about? The third house is about ambition, courage, and competitiveness. Trump is the most ambitious, courageous, and competitive person that I can think of who's well known, right? And also, by virtue of the fact of Jupiter being in the third house, it forms shankha yoga with Saturn, the sixth lord. And that's a yoga which gives courage, competitiveness, strength, and ability to overcome odds and obstacles. So Jupiter in the third has things that very accurately describe Trump. Jupiter in the second also has things about it that very accurately describe Trump. So this is one of those things where that factor alone is not going to allow you to close the book on an interpretation, and certainly not close the book on whether or not tropical or sidereal is more accurate. Now here's another quote from a comment. Trump became president as soon as the Jupiter Dasha started, right? So that doesn't matter if you're doing sidereal or tropical. That's true for both, because you're talking about Vimshottari Dasha. Vimshottari Dasha is based on nakshatras, and I'm not telling you to make the nakshatras tropical. The nakshatras are based on stars. Sidereus means star in Latin. So nakshatra are always going to be sidereal, whether you do it my way or if you do it your way. So his dashas are going to be the same. So whether it's tropical or sidereal, he's going to become the president as soon as the Jupiter Dasha starts, right? Now, in either system, tropical or sidereal, Jupiter is his fifth lord, aspecting his first lord in Raja Yoga. So naturally, something really great is going to happen to this guy when his Jupiter Dasha starts, or during his Jupiter Dasha. Now, why is it right there where it started? Because it so happens that November 8th, 2016, Jupiter was in return to his natal Jupiter. So the transiting Jupiter was also aspecting his first lord in Raja Yoga. And on top of that, Mars, which is super important in his chart, in either system, was at the end of Capricorn. So again, in either system, Mars is going to be in Capricorn, and it's going to be aspecting his ascendant and his natal Mars. And also, the ninth house cusp from the sixth house. So in either system, it makes perfect sense that he would have a huge victory at the beginning of his Jupiter Dasha. And by the way, that's exactly why I, using tropical, predicted in, I think, September or October that Trump would beat Hillary. Okay, more quotes here from the comments. This person says, Jupiter sits in the second house in the sidereal chart, receiving the aspect of Saturn in the case of sidereal. And this makes a link of a trinal lord, which is Jupiter, with a Kendra lord, which is Saturn, and therefore fulfills the condition needed for a Raja Yoga, which gives power and authority. So first of all, you're not calculating Vedic Parashari aspects correctly. You're just using Indian pop astrology version of aspects. And guess what? I'm just about to start a course on true Vedic aspects. So if you want to take my course on true Vedic aspects, look on my YouTube channel page in the community tab or discussion tab or something like that, or go look at my Facebook page, or just contact me, because it's going to start September 15th. So, and also this person doesn't understand that aspects are about the angles between planets, and so they don't change when the zodiac definition changes. So it's about for example, the angle between this hand and this hand is this much. Now, it doesn't matter if I hold my hands like this or if I hold my hands like this, the angle is the same. So this person making this comment doesn't understand that aspects are not calculated by house, they're calculated by degree, and that therefore the angle of the degree of the angle between the two planets doesn't change regardless of the ayanamsha that you use, or even if you don't use an ayanamsha. So how much aspect does Saturn actually have on Jupiter? According to the correct way of calculating it, it's 80% of a full aspect, which is a lot. And this is the truth whether you're using a tropical system or a sidereal system. Now, there's another thing that this commenter doesn't understand. The commenter doesn't understand the rules for forming a Raja Yoga using an aspect. Aspects can form Raja Yogas only if it's Rahu or Ketu being aspected, or if the planets are mutually aspecting. Saturn's aspecting Jupiter, like the person says, and Saturn is a Kendra lord, the seventh lord, and Jupiter is a Kona lord, the fifth lord. Right? So that's one half of the equation of getting a Raja Yoga, but you have to have Jupiter aspect Saturn as well to get a link to form between the Kendra Lord and the Kona Lord. Jupiter's aspect on Saturn, however, is not strong at all. It's only 20% of an aspect. So there isn't a mutual aspect, so this link of Saturn and Jupiter doesn't form a Raja Yoga. The person goes on to say that Jupiter aspects the 6th house of competition and the 10th house of career and authority. None of these things are visible in tropical when Jupiter goes to the 3rd. So again, it's because you don't know how to calculate aspects. And especially you don't know how to calculate aspects to houses, which is even more one step more complicated. And you don't understand that aspects are not affected by changes in Anamsha. Right? So the amount of aspect that Jupiter actually has on the 6th and the 10th house is going to be the same, regardless of whether you're doing sidereal or tropical or whatever Anamsha. Jupiter is going to have 85% aspect on both the 6th and 10th house. Which, yes, that's a lot of aspect. And that shows a person who can be fortunate in rising to fame in society. But that's true for sidereal or tropical. Now let's get to some doubts about the D10, which is really something that made me kind of smile or laugh. So somebody said sidereal D10 is much more accurate. With the debilitated Sun and Jupiter, that just makes me smile. So the person's rationale for that is that his fame is real, but it's not necessarily positive. But my friend, maybe you don't know that much about fame, because that's simply the nature of fame. Fame is not necessarily positive. The person says the drishti, or aspect of a weak sun upon the masses of the 7th house, is totally Donald Trump. The 7th house is the masses. The 7th house is interactions with people. The 10th house is the masses. The 7th house is how you interact with people, and the aspect or drishti of a weak sun on the 7th house probably indicates a person that's a bit timid in taking a leading role in communicating with people and interacting with people, which is totally not Mr. Trump, president. And the commenter says, Trump does not exude real strength or suggest that he has a competent mind of his own. Now, this guy might be a buffoon or he might be Jesus Christ, but regardless of your opinion of him, to think that this guy doesn't have real strength or a competent mind, obviously this guy is smart. Otherwise, he could not possibly have done what he's done. Now, the comments go on to say, the appeal to the lowest is precisely Libran in its quest for balance and compromise. So, what you're saying is the D10 is more accurate about Trump. The sidereal D10 is more accurate for Trump because it has a debilitated sun. Because the sun in Libra will try to appeal to the lowest common denominator and also try to be balanced and compromised. So you're describing Trump as being a balanced and compromising person? Now, Trump definitely does appeal to the lowest common denominator. Why? Exactly because he's not balanced. Like, why are you focusing so much on this thing that the sun in Libra is going to explain everything about this person? All you need to do is look at the first chart. The first lord is the sun, and it's in Raja Yoga with Rahu. This guy is going to be associated with unusual people, not very balanced people, very unbalanced and exaggerated people. The guy is going to be very exaggerating. He's got the first lord with Rahu, whether it's sidereal or tropical. And it's in Raja Yoga, so it's going to work to his advantage. And it's in Gemini, which is about how you deal with people and communicate with people. On top of that, the 11th lord is in the 12th, in Ardra with Saturn and Venus. And he's got Magha rising, and he's got Jyeshta moon. So you don't need anything fancy in the subcharts to explain a person who's going to play on irrational instincts, manipulate people, really manipulate, dominate, and control communications in a strange way. The thing about the D10 chart, it doesn't show how you communicate or any stuff like that. It shows how you're successful in your career. And the thing about the sun is it shows how you're successful in your career. And the thing about the debilitated sun is you're not very successful monarchially. You're more successful if you kind of give other people power and distribute, right? So anybody that looks at a debilitated sun rising in the Dashamsha, or the D10, who looks at it objectively is going to see, well, this doesn't really indicate career success unless this person gets out of an executive role. And so how in the world is this guy like the executive, the boss, whatever his TV show is called, and the president of the United States? Now, the sidereal D10 or Dashamsha also had a debilitated Jupiter in the 4th house, right? So this commenter says, well, that debilitated Jupiter is very accurate because It's debilitated in the house that deals with your homeland. He's not pure and elevated in his patriotism and nationalism. That, again, you don't need to look at a D10 to see how a person feels about things. You look at a D10 to see what their role in the world is and how they succeed in their career. Look, if you look at Trump's first chart, you're going to see that his first lord and the sun and the moon are all super close to Rahu and Ketu. So that's going to immediately explain to you everything about this person is not particularly pure and elevated. They're not sophisticated. They don't do things formally or properly. You don't need anything else. It's right there in the first thing you would look at. On top of that, he's got his moon in Jyeshta. So there you go. You don't need to try to bend the D10 to fit something else. What does debilitated Jupiter in the fourth house of the D10, what does that actually suggest? It certainly doesn't suggest that you can be successful in careers involving property and real estate. Now, a lot of people said, hey, Vic, do you know that Trump bankrupted 6 companies? So that means that his sidereal stuff is accurate. Because all that stuff showing that he's got failure in his career is right. See, he drove 6 companies into bankruptcy. So friends, this guy, Donald Trump, he's got $3 billion. This guy's got $3 billion to his name. If you think that he's financially unsuccessful or made mistakes, you need to rethink. Of course, whenever you do anything, you make mistakes and correct them. And actually, bankruptcy is very often not a mistake. The very fact that a guy with $3 billion who put 6 companies into bankruptcy has still got $3 billion proves that bankruptcy is not always a mistake or a loss. So look, you got to find, this guy's got $3 billion. You cannot interpret that with a chart that shows serious problems with like Jupiter debilitated in the fourth house of a D10, which is a very external chart, and who made most of that money by buying and selling buildings and stuff like that, right? In fact, now go back to the D1, which is more important than all these Varga charts, right? It's the foundation for all the Varga charts. Go back to that D1, the main birth chart. Remember when I talked about how one of the differences between the tropical and sidereal chart is that the tropical chart has the 11th lord in the 12th house, and that some siderealists say it makes more sense to have the 11th lord stay in the 11th house. This is what you're talking about now with his bankruptcies. With his bankruptcies turning into profit is exactly what the 11th lord in the 12th house means. Actually, I didn't know that he bankrupted 6 companies because I really don't give a damn about politicians. However, now that you told me that he bankrupted 6 countries and he still got $3 billion, that is exactly what this 11th lord in the 12th house, that's the type of thing it is capable of when it's in a chart like Trump's with so much other heavy-duty, powerful stuff in it. That's you're profiting through losses. 11th lord in the 12th house. And so one final thing to talk about is I mentioned that one of the key differences between sidereal and tropical for Donald Trump is where the eclipse goes. In the sidereal chart, his Ketu is in the 4th house in Scorpio with the moon. And in the tropical chart, his Ketu and moon are in the 5th house Sagittarius. So somebody raised the doubt that, well, Ketu in the 4th house with the moon in Scorpio is more accurate for Trump because, quote, that shows his excellent instincts and love for home. This guy hates traveling. Okay, so again, like a lot of the times sidereal astrology works because we have adjusted the way that we interpret things that don't make sense anymore with the basic symbolism. So let's just interpret debilitated moon in the 4th house using that just inherent symbolisms, right? That signifies changeable emotions, which is the moon, having an adverse effect, which is the debilitation, on your home and your comfort at home, which is the 4th house. So you're saying that somebody who loves being at home should have a debilitated moon in the 4th house. It just doesn't make sense. It's not a strong argument. In any case, you don't have to go there to see maybe this guy doesn't like to travel, because in either system, he's got the 4th lord right on the ascendant and a fixed ascendant, right? Leo. But another thing is, where do you get the idea that this guy doesn't like to travel? Donald Trump travels all over the place all the time. I mean, if you look at this chart holistically, this is a chart that doesn't settle down. It's obvious, right? And whether you're looking at tropical or sidereal, you got Mars on the ascendant, which makes a person like to roam or need to roam. You got the first lord with Rahu, which again makes a person change up and go here and there a lot. You got the moon with Ketu, which makes the emotions not really settle down, and that drives one to move around in search of satisfaction. And then you got the 10th lord in the 12th house, which is putting the lord of movement in a faraway place. So regardless of the system that you use, it actually doesn't depict a person that really doesn't like to travel. So what have we accomplished by responding to these comments? Just to show that most of these arguments against my video are not very good. Thanks.